This weekend marks the end of Portland Pride Week, and we've seen the Pride Festival, the annual Pride Parade, and a new Guinness World Record for the longest continuous drag stage show, more than 48 hours at the Darcel 15 Showplace in Old Town. The event raised more than $275,000 for the Trevor Project, focused on suicide prevention efforts among LGBTQ youth. The show was also a statement against the hundreds of anti-gay, anti-trans laws passed or proposed throughout the country. In fact, the Oregon Senate Republican walkout in Salem was primarily over House Bill 2002, which dealt with abortion and transgender health care rights in Oregon. As we just mentioned, it passed in a compromised form. Chaz Vitale is living in this political storm. He's transgender, an artist and an activist and a board member of the Q Center, a safe place for the queer community. Chaz, welcome to Eye on Northwest Politics.
Thank you for having me.
How close did you follow House Bill 2002 and the Republican walkout, and what were your thoughts about it?
Honestly, I wasn't following it day by day. There are so many things to track politically right now in terms of bills that are being introduced that have strong immediate impacts on trans and intersex communities that most of my attention was actually going to national politics at the time. Locally, I was surprised at a walkout of that length for people who are supposed to be representing constituents who have employed them to do a really important job for our state in representing all of us and in collaborating on complex issues that they don't always see eye to eye with their opponents on. I was extremely happy to see that it wasn't something that was derailed by people not showing up. So the fact that we are seeing these kinds of bills all over the country, and in Oregon, there's a strong response from our current leadership and a continued response to the work that's been happening here for many years to expand and revise existing laws to include revisions to existing care. And the ways that those impact people are huge financially in terms of what an entire group has access to for other resources in their life, like buying homes, starting families, starting businesses, living the American dream. So any amount of money that doesn't have to go directly to medical debt that other cis people would have the same access to seems like a shining example of Oregonian pride to me. I'm extremely heartened to see that they've included facial feminization surgery as well as tracheal shaving and hair removal, as those are required parts of successful transitions for many people pursuing them.
You mentioned this, in many states we are seeing anti-LGBTQ trans legislation either being proposed or actually being passed. So what do you think this says about us as a country and the political climate that we're dealing with right now?
Well, I would also say that the trans bills or the trans-focused bills that are being written and passed are often coming from a lack of understanding that's so profound that they also intentionally and unintentionally target other groups of people, such as intersex communities. There's an inextricable entwinement between intersex people and trans people. There's a significant overlap in those communities, and there are fewer supported resources to manage the impacts of laws being passed by majority powers. Right now in Oregon, we're seeing large numbers of people coming from other parts of the country fleeing home states. Some of our existing services were already maxed to capacity with long waiting lines of 1.5 to 2 years. Those have now been extended for the people that had already been living here, and many of those people have been told by their primary care providers that they will only be able to manage emergent needs in order to create continuing care opportunities for people that have fled here from other parts of the country they are citizens in.
Tell us about your journey. When did you make the transition and why?
Well, my experience is a little bit less typical, if there is such a thing as a typical trans experience. Trans experience is incredibly broad and really different for everyone, so our stories are not monolithic, and mine is particularly unstandard. I was born intersex, so I have a hormonal condition that didn't start impacting my sex characteristics until puberty, which meant that my designation from birth was not correct. And it also meant that transitioning would not be something that was based on studies that had already been done, because there wasn't any data on anyone who hadn't started out from a female or from a male vantage point. So my body started shifting when I was in puberty. It became clear I was very different than the people around me. When I reached college, that was when it first became incredibly clear that genetically and physically I was not the same as the people around me. All of these things would have been really different broadly, nationally, I think, for many trans people and intersex people, as well as my own personal experience, if it was included in sexual reproductive health education as the fact of human experience that it is, to have variation to sex and to gender. There are variations to both. They exist on a physical and a psychological spectrum. It's not about fixed points or one new pronoun or one new gender or the idea that something's being introduced. It's more a reflection of the beautiful diversity that already exists in the natural world on every level, including in human beings. I started taking hormones to suppress my natural testosterone when I was about 18. Unfortunately, the care that I received was from a doctor that didn't have training in that, and so I was prescribed 6 times the normal dose of estrogen and testosterone blockers, and it made me extremely ill. It also acts as a blood pressure medication, so it caused a lot of health complications. There were issues with that provider being concerned about the outcomes that were happening to my body and falsifying medical records and not reporting appointments that she was making with me at off hours in order to conceal the error that she had made. And none of that was information I understood because I was so young in my adult journey and so new to the adult responsibilities of medical care and how to navigate that, that I didn't understand what was even happening in my experience at the time. After that, I stopped taking any intervention or any attempt to assimilate my body physically to meet a more cis representation. And during that time, I experienced a significant increase in oppression, discrimination, violence, physical attack for many years.
So you've gone through that experience of being targeted
Yes.
because of your sexuality.
Yes, and in my experience, most of the trans people I know have at some point been targeted for their gender identity, for their sexual orientation, for the combination of those things, for the lack of clarity that a stranger can have about that, and the entitlement that they can feel to finding out what the answer is, regardless of consent or the fact that it really shouldn't matter what is going on for a stranger if you're not intimately engaged with them.
And it sounds like that experience is why you decided to become an activist. We've only got a few seconds left, but just address that quickly, why you decided to come out front with your situation.
You know, there's a vibrant community in Portland of people that have been working on these subjects for many years, and it was one of the reasons I felt inspired to move here. I thought it would be a safe place, and I feel really, really grateful to contribute to that legacy and to expanding trans and intersex care in Oregon.
Chaz Vitale, thank you very much for sharing your story and being here on Eye on Northwest Politics.
Thank you very much for having me.